And a warm welcome to Monday's Richie Allen Show to you. I hope you're well. Warm is the operative word in the sentence again. It's incredibly warm. It's damn hot, as they say. It is the 2nd of July 2018. Tell you why this is recorded in a couple of seconds' time. Got to record it this week. I did put a video on YouTube today explaining that, but I'll tell you more about it in a second. But I've got a good show lined up for you. Got some interesting things to talk about today. Let's crack on with it then. Welcome to Monday's show.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv. It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Right, going to record the program this week because of the insufferable heat in the studio. A heat wave has fallen on the UK. You know all about that because I've been whinging about it last week and even the week before. So going to record the program. I can't take it outside because picture a radio studio in your head. Well, I have a real one. BBC Standard, all hooked up in this room at this domicile. I can't move it, so it's stuck where it is. And I've decided this week I will have a guest or two throughout the course of the week. Today it's just me, is that I'll record the programme and put it out at 7 p.m. every evening as usual. For those who normally listen live, it will go out at 7 every evening. And for those who get the podcast, it won't mean much of a difference to them. Alright, so that's the way it's going to be. It's the way it's going to be. The old pre-record. I much prefer live because I really get a kick out of reading the comments coming in on Twitter. And live is where I live, I said on my YouTube video today, and I meant it. Love it. Love live radio. Love being live. Pre-record doesn't suit me. Some wag put something on YouTube about the World Cup. Believe me, the World Cup has nothing to do with it. If it did, I would have done it last week. I couldn't give a shite about the World Cup. That's the gospel truth. There was a time when I was a huge football fan. These days I'll watch Ireland play, I'll watch a bit of England occasionally, but I've not been watching the World Cup. I watched Spain and Portugal. Was it the day after the World Cup kicked off? And that was it. I've not watched any of it since then. It ain't the football, believe me. It is the heat. All right. Now, because I'm recording it today, and as I record it, it's just after 4:20 p.m. as I record it. Jacob Rees-Mogg, one of the more hardline Brexiteers, he wrote a piece in the Telegraph today basically saying that there will be no accepting any type of soft Brexit. That if there's a soft Brexit taken by Theresa May, basically he says the government will collapse. That's basically what he's been saying. Michael Gove also not happy with news that Theresa May has presented a third model for handling customs after the UK leaves the European Union. Now, the fascist dictatorship, bullying, tyrannical European Union has basically stuck its fingers up to David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, and Theresa May at every juncture. They are negotiating in bad faith. They don't want to agree anything. They don't want to agree anything or any deal. They want Parliament to take over the negotiations from Theresa May. Ultimately, that's what they want because they want to reverse the referendum result. Now, later this afternoon, Theresa May will be facing the Commons to talk about maybe not the detail of her third model for handling customs, but facing them anyway to probably update them on her meetings in Brussels last week. I would ordinarily bring you some of that on the live Richie Allen Show, but it's happening after I record this. But don't worry about it. Nothing is going to happen before Friday when Theresa May is meeting the cabinet at Chequers, which is, of course, the traditional country retreat for UK prime ministers. So that's what's going on. It is fuckery incarnate. The EU will not say yes to anything proposed by the by the UK government, unless it's full membership of customs union, full membership of the single market, freedom of movement, then the EU might do a deal. But May can't do that because allegedly hardline Brexiteers like Mogg and others will bring down the government. I said the day after the referendum, June 24th, 2016, there would be no leaving, because the Agenda 21, Agenda 30, agenda plan for the world, one world government and all of that, depopulation, can only be implemented through political unions leading to a one world government, and the European Union is one of those. Right. Shall we move on and not talk any more Brexit? Please, Richie. Yes. They inhale a lot of helium, to my listeners. I want to talk about something. I've got some good audio. I've got some good stories to do today. I think they're good anyway. But I want to talk about something before that. I want to get into something, dear listener. I want to get into something nice and deep. I've been thinking a lot over the last few months about Google and about Facebook. And I was going to write about it and put it on richieallen.co.uk, where there has been a scarcity of articles lately, but that's because of the heat. It is because, I'm not blaming everything on the heat, but I've been working pretty hard on this programme, as I do. Because of the heat, I don't have the extra energy to write stuff, so I'm not going to do it until it cools down a bit. However, I've wanted to write about something I believe that has happened in the last few years and that hasn't really been talked about. It has been talked about, but not in the detail I'm going to talk about now. We have, right now and forevermore, something that I'm going to call the world's first and last press regulator, independent media regulator. We have a global, the first and last of its kind, press regulator for the independent media, and it is Facebook and Google/YouTube, which I believe was set up to counteract the potential rise of a truly independent media, a genuinely independent media full of good stuff and bad stuff and shit stuff, but genuinely independent no matter how good, bad or shit. And I have no doubt now that it was realised back when the internet came online and the first podcasts started appearing, and our friend Maria Heller, one of the world's, if not the first podcaster of independently created content. I think when the internet came online, it was realised by the tyrants and the financial banking elites that there was the potential for a counter-narrative to the system, a potential for a counter-narrative to be heard and to be seen. Now, the media, for decades, had acted as a dam against the tide of independent thinkers and awakening. I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, how will I phrase this? And I think it's a good phrase. I think the mainstream media acted as a dam of sorts against the rising tide of independent thinkers over the decades. And how did the media do that? Well, two things. It ignored them or it ridiculed them. In fact, it largely ignored them. There was ridicule, but they largely ignored. And marginalising by ignoring was a wonderful tool of the establishment pre-internet days. Because if you couldn't get on local radio, if you couldn't get on national radio, local TV, public access TV, or national TV, well, you couldn't really be heard. Or if you couldn't get your article printed in a newspaper. So the media acted as the dam by ignoring people. Didn't matter how many followers these people had. It didn't matter how many people turned out to hear people speak. The media ignored them. Now, sometimes editors, for a giggle, for shits and giggles, would invite a conspiracy researcher on and put them up against an obnoxious, fairly hostile host and light the fuse. And we've seen that so many times over the years. And of course, the segment would only last a few minutes anyway. You'd have a lot of shouting, a lot of ridiculing, and nobody would actually hear what the conspiracy researcher had to say. A great example of this, I do remember, was many moons ago, back in the 1990s. Richard Littlejohn had a programme on Sky News. Now, he writes for the Daily Mail these days. And he had a programme on Sky News in the early evening, and he brought David Icke on. And that was a great example of what they did. Icke was brought on. Little John acted like a complete moron and muppet, never gave Icke more than a couple of sentences before jumping down his throat and calling him names. And eventually, famously, David Icke left the show. He didn't walk off the show, but when it ended, he got up and he walked out and said something to Little John as he was leaving. That's what they did. So nobody got to hear what the conspiracy researcher had to say. So they ignored them or occasionally brought them on and ridiculed them. So the conspiracy researcher came off looking like a flustered person with no control, no answers really. Came off looking flustered under hardline questioning. And so many people were suckered in like that. So many researchers were suckered in. They were invited on telly and maybe naively, believed that they were going to get a fair shake of the whip. No chance. It was embarrassing for them and for their friends and for their families. And some didn't give a shit. And that's the way it was for years and years and years and years. Until the interweb, until Tinternet came and podcasting. Because then presenters back in the day who'd never get a job in radio because of their views, not always because they weren't good enough. Yes, there is a lot of shite in the independent media, poorly presented shite by people who haven't ever given a second thought to maybe understanding how to present, fair enough. But not always because of that. Mostly, people wouldn't get a job in radio because of their views. Now, they could record an interview with somebody with an alternative view of anything, could be anything. They could edit it and put it on their website. Game changer. Huge game changer for the media in general. A paradigm shift that was. I remember it well. You know, from my position in mainstream media, looking out, could see that people were doing this. I didn't fear it. I thought it was great. I was interested in conspiracy stuff anyway. So these presenters were able to put stuff on their website. It was a bit rough and ready, a bit rough and tumble, but they could do it. And suddenly, they didn't have to book out a hall and fight with the parish and fight with the local committee to get their speech, to stand up and speak. Now they could put stuff on their website. Huge game changer. So there were millions of people around the world who had always been interested in conspiracy research on so many topics, but they had no place to go. Yes, they could buy books, buy so many luminaries of independent conspiracy research on so many topics, but they had to wait for the books to come out, or they had to hope one of these guys and gals came to town. Now they had a place to go. And some of these radio shows began to take off and play to very big audiences. Jeff Rents, George Newry, Maria, Alex Jones. And some of them were so successful initially that they were picked up and relayed via syndication to even wider audiences. Hugely successful and good. Good stuff. This was a seismic shift, which of course I think, if I think back, I think it probably really gathered pace after September the 11th. It kind of grew legs, took on a life of its own. And as I said, I was in commercial radio then, but I was aware that there were internet shows out there, conspiracy shows. But post 9/11, I think we saw loads of them come online. And I think, dear listener, and you might disagree with this, I think you will disagree with some of this, and that's good. Feel free to disagree. I think initially the establishment was unprepared for it. I think they might have been. Nobody's perfect. No matter how malevolent, no matter how evil, Machiavellian, whatever you want to call these people, they're not always on top of everything. And I think they were initially unprepared for it. Now, YouTube came online in 2005. If you remember, 3 guys who used to work for PayPal. Yes, PayPal it was. Founded it. Can't remember their names at all. 3 guys founded YouTube, in 2005. And that was massive for independent content creators. Now it wasn't just radio. You could make videos as well. I've always preferred radio. You have a face for it. Yes, I heard that one before. I've always preferred it. It's an intimate medium. It's one-to-one. People listen. They pick up more via the medium of radio than they do via video. Don't argue with me. I know more about that than you. That's a fact. Radio, you pick up more, you hear more, you absorb more. Anyway, YouTube comes online, big for the independent content creators. Great for Alex at the time. InfoWars, brilliant, right? Great. And others. Because previously, if you wanted to make a conspiracy film and you wanted a lot of people to see it, you had to try and get it distributed. And that was difficult. Because even if you were happy to incur the costs of the production yourself and you didn't want any help from a studio, they wouldn't make your film because of the content. But now you could finance your film or not, or make it very cheaply and put it on YouTube. Again, a massive game changer that was in the mid-2000s. And not just documentary films either, but your own home-produced television news show. To hell with production values. You could stick a sign made by one of your children behind you, and who give a shit? You could sit there and you could say what you wanted to say if, in fact, you had something to say. Game changer. You could talk about 9/11, Kennedy, Monsanto, vaccines, Agenda 21. Again, paradigm shift. And it stirred a bit of uneasiness, I think, in the establishment, in the system. There's a great disturbance in the force, Obi-Wan Kenobi would have said. Now, significantly, a year and a half after the three PayPal lads founded YouTube, they sold it to Google for about $1.5 billion, maybe a bit more. Not good. Not good. Shouldn't have been allowed, of course. I'll come back to that in a minute. Should never have been allowed, Google buying YouTube from these three lads. Although I'm not convinced that I wouldn't have accepted the $1.5 billion, to be honest with you. But it shouldn't have been allowed. Now, until about 2 and a bit years ago, seemingly, Google allowed a fairly level playing field. Not totally, but fairly. You could grow pretty quickly if you knew what you were doing. If you had some skill at creating the videos, or making the radio shows and putting that audio on YouTube. If you had ability to do it, you could grow pretty quickly. And that came with AdSense monetization through Google, meaning that you could finance your work through the ad revenue, but not anymore. More on that in a few minutes. Now, a year before YouTube, Zuckerberg launched Facebook. Look, don't hold me to the timeline. You might say it's 1.5 years before YouTube. So a year and a bit before YouTube, Zuckerberg launched Facebook. Again, initially, great for independent media, or so folks thought. Folks were so enamored of it that they neglected their own websites and poured all their efforts into maintaining and growing their Facebook page. Followers became important. Too important, followers. Most people were preoccupied by how many followers they had. My dick is bigger than yours. And they were more preoccupied by that than whether or not people were really engaging with their output. You see, when somebody comes to your website, you know they're engaging with your output. Not on Facebook. Were they really watching the videos? Were they really reading the posts? Or were they just clicking like? What were they doing with the information? Were your Facebook followers distributing your information? Were they taking it away from Facebook into the real world? That wasn't important. What was important was followers to people. I have 50,000 followers. I'm the man. Master's dick. That's the way it was. It had to be. That was the lure to get people in. And in fact, early on, looking back, you could probably say Facebook was fairly benign. It had to be benign at the beginning, because it wouldn't have survived if it had put in the algorithms that we have now that destroy your reach, the algorithms that make sure that nobody sees your output unless they've seen it before. So it had to be benign in the beginning. Couldn't have it like it is now. Nobody would have used it. So at the beginning, it was a level playing field. At least it seemed to be. That was the appeal of it. So Facebook and YouTube, which is now owned by Google, well, came to be owned by Google in 2006, were a perfect fit. you made a video. There was really no place else to put it other than YouTube. And remember, I talked earlier on about why Google should not have been allowed to buy YouTube. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the first thing that Google did when it owned YouTube was it killed Dailymotion. And every other video sharing platform killed them. It denied them the organic reach that it would naturally get. Because Google, apart from Yahoo, or alongside Yahoo, the biggest search engine in the world, Google has eclipsed it now. So why would any competition authority allow that happen? Because it was meant to be. YouTube was going to become the only game in town. See where I'm going with this? Google buys YouTube and destroys the reach of every other video platform. So now you make a video, upload it to YouTube, and then post it to Facebook. Lovely. What could possibly go wrong? Well, quite a bit could go wrong, actually. Monopoly could go wrong. And monopolies are devastating for plurality. Look it up. You had one video platform and one website in Facebook. And Facebook, I looked it up today, apparently it's got 2.2 billion monthly users. Jesus wept. 2.2 billion monthly users on YouTube. And, drumroll, more than 1 billion hours of content is watched on YouTube every day. Holy fucking shit. 1 billion hours of content is watched around the world on YouTube every day. So the establishment goes, bingo, we've got you, snared, trapped, owned, all in the one place. We've kettled the world. So I say, and this is my argument, Facebook and YouTube have become the world's first, I should say, and last global media regulator. It is game over. It is deciding what you see when you see it. Deliberate. Question mark, deliberate. Well, certainly in respect to Facebook, yes. Facebook, it was always the plan with Facebook. Nothing to do with money. My dear and much loved friend Hayden Hewitt, whose opinions I have enormous respect for, I think he's wrong. He says it's all about money, getting you in there to make you eventually pay for the reach. Of course, it's a part of it, but it's only a small part of it. Facebook was designed by the intelligence agency. Zuckerberg is the casino owner frontman who had nothing to do with it, I don't believe, to get you all into one place, to control what you see when you see it and how you see it. YouTube, I don't know enough about the three dudes who founded it, but they wasted no time in selling it to Google. I wonder, was there a conversation? Lads, they're offering us 1.65 billion. We've only been in business for 1 year and 4 months. Let's keep it for a while. God knows what Google will do with it. Let's keep it ourselves. We'll make enough money. But they got rid of it very quickly, didn't they? So that's what we have. And whether you like it or not, the independent media is regulated by Facebook and Google. Decides what you can post and when, what you can't, what needs to be censored, what needs to be deleted. And worse still, it has total control over your reach, your viewing figures, your listening figures. It is a global media regulator, not a platform for social networking. A self-appointed global media regulator that answers to nobody, is under the control of no government, and there is absolutely no oversight either. And I'm in no doubt, my friend, that the rise of the independent media alarmed, to some extent, those behind Agenda 2130, those behind the wars in the Middle East, the financial banking elites, the Zionist neocons, were alarmed by the rise of the independent media, and they saw an opportunity in the growth of YouTube through Google's acquisition of it and the rise of Facebook, that they could build a bigger dam to slow down or stop the rising tide of alternative media, and how successful they've been in doing it. This is Monday's Richie Allen Show. Thanks for joining me. Going to take a break. When we come back, going to go a different way. I will be looking at the Twitter comments on this a bit later on. I'll be fascinated to see what you think of that. That's what we have. A global media self-appointed regulator, 2.2 billion users a month Facebook, and 1 billion hours of YouTube videos are watched a day. Try and get your head around those bloody numbers. This is Monday's Richie Allen Show.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Welcome back to the Richie Allen Show for Monday, July 2nd, 2018. Our pre-recorded programme, it will be pre-recorded this week. That is not the new thing. Do not panic. The Richie Allen Show is a live 2-hour radio show which will air live nightly at 7 p.m. UK time, as long as it's on air in the future. But this week the weather is extreme. It was last week. I can't cope with it. The studio gets the temperatures in the mid-40s because of the equipment, and it's so uncomfortable. Nobody should have to put up with it, and that includes me. So we'll pre-record this week, and I promise you it will be packed full of interesting content and sometimes interesting analysis. It's up to you whether it's interesting or not, my analysis. Now, this is important, and it gets spoken about a lot on this programme because it's huge, I think. It's huge, this. I talked about it yesterday on Sunday View as well. By the way, I still can't get over this head of diversity at the BBC, without missing a beat, without laughing, saying that diversity is good at the BBC, but we're not as good as we should be because we don't have enough lesbians. That's a quote, by the way. I'm not making that up. Yesterday I talked about it on Sunday View. Maybe I was a bit rude talking about it. That's insane. Now, Victoria Derbyshire is a BBC television and radio presenter, and I like her. She's a very good presenter, Victoria. Look, she's a beeb, an establishment presenter. There's only so much she can do and say, but she's good. I like her. And she's reported on this. More than 300 transgender children a year are now starting on a course of puberty-blocking drugs. One of the transgender children spoken to by the Victoria Derbyshire programme has now begun her treatment, which gives youngsters time to decide if they want to live as a man or as a woman. And the girl is Jessica, who's 11, who says, she's 11, Jessica, I'm happy I've been given the drugs because now I know that I won't grow facial hair. I just don't want a beard. I'm a girl, says 11-year-old Jessica, who was born a boy. Now, we've been following Jessica. This is the BBC now. The BBC has been following Jessica and her friend Lily as they have transitioned to live as girls at home and at primary school. Jessica, now preparing for the move to secondary school in September, has started taking puberty-blocking injections once a month. If someone asks me if I'm transgender, I will tell them. I won't yell it out, but I will just say, she says. It's quite rude, honestly, when people say this is just a phase because they don't understand it really. Now, in the UK, the main centre specialising in gender issues in the under-18s is the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust based in London and Leeds. And they report that the number of under-18s visiting the clinic in the last year has risen by a quarter to 2,519, about 50 a week. It's rising exponentially. Doctors say, this is important, that there is no single explanation for the increase, but there is growing recognition of transgender people in society and more awareness of treatment options. Excuse me. Around 300 children a year are now referred to a separate clinic to start on hormone-blocking treatments, which can only be found prescribed on the NHS after the patient has started puberty. Back to the doctors saying that there is no single explanation for this huge rise in children saying that they identify not as the sex they were born, but identify as a member of the opposite sex. What about planting the seed of an idea in the minds of young children that there are many genders to choose from? Could that explain some of the rise? I don't know. No expert. It's a big issue, this. It's a huge issue. Blocking puberty is a massive issue, and it isn't a good idea. According to who? Well, there was a paper published last year, and the paper was published, I'll give you the name of it first. The paper was called Growing Pains, Problems with Puberty Suppression in Treating Gender Dysphoria. And that was co-authored by Paul Hrutz, a professor at Washington University School of Medicine, Lawrence Meyer, a scholar at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and a professor at Arizona State, and Paul McHugh, a professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. So learned men, at least establishment learned men anyway. They don't like puberty blocking drugs. What did their paper say? Well, the paper challenges three claims. First of all, it says that the NHS will tell you that giving puberty blocking drugs is okay because the treatment is reversible. Well, the authors of this paper say that's not true. Puberty blockers are meant as to be a kind of let's just hold off puberty solution to delay the development of the most prominent features of a child's biological sex while the child is coming to terms with the gender identity issue. But the paper by Hrutz, Meyer and McHugh argues that it is unknown if regular sex-typical puberty will resume following suppression. So they're saying the argument hasn't been settled about the impact it has on puberty later on. The treatment is harmless, says the NHS and says healthcare providers in America. Again, the researchers Hrutz, Meyer and McHugh say, well, puberty suppression hormones prevent the development of secondary sex characteristics. It inhibits bone growth, it decreases bone accretion, it prevents full organisation and maturation of the brain, and it definitely inhibits fertility, say these guys. And they give other side effects as well. Sterility, coronary disease, cardiovascular disease, blood pressure elevation and breast cancer. But who's listening when these doyens of psychiatry and medicine put out these papers? Well, nobody in the mainstream media is listening, because the mainstream media is fully on board with this relentless and I would say dangerous progressive agenda, meaning that all dissenting opinions must be ignored. The children, God love them, and the children are the first priority. Their health and their well-being psychologically and physically. Are the parents of those children getting puberty blocking drugs on the NHS being made aware of these studies? I would say they're probably not. And that could be devastating to children who are highly suggestible and therefore, you might argue, most vulnerable to this agenda, if it is indeed an agenda. I'm trying not to be dogmatic about these things. Maybe I have been in the past. Now, Victoria, Derbyshire, did speak with a child called Castiel Campbell, known as Cass. Now, Cass is a 13-year-old transgender boy, born female, believes that she's female. Believes that she's male. So Cass has shared some of the online abuse that he received from someone at school to raise awareness about the fact that children are being abused and being harassed, which I don't think is funny. Have a listen to what Cass had to say. We'll talk about it afterwards.
This person is urging you to take your own life.
Yeah.
You received this message. If I see you alive at school on Monday, I'm going to leak the fact you're actually a little tranny and that you're not even a boy. You will never live it down. So do it. Goodbye, pathetic C word. See you in hell.
Just really messed up. Like, I was dead upset when I got it. And, like, some people just don't realise, like, the effects that the words can have on people. Like, because they're just like, oh, it's just like a silly little anonymous message. Like, they'll get over it. But, like, it's just, like, it just sucks to have people say that kind of stuff about you. Some people just, like, do not understand. And, like, that's okay. Like, people, like, have their own opinion on things. And I'm not going to try and, like, change everyone's opinion on trans people. But I think people should just know that we are humans, and, like, just because we might, like we just, like, don't feel comfortable in our own bodies, that's not a valid reason for people to just, like, send us, like, hate.
No, it isn't. Nobody should be abused by anybody. End of story. But I would say to Cass, if Cass was my child, I would say, listen, kid, you're going to have to toughen up a bit. The little bastard who sent you the message saying you should kill yourself should get a kick in the arse at least. But toughen up. He's a cowardly little fucker who sent an anonymous message because he doesn't have the balls to stand in front of you and speak to you like a human being. Toughen up, Cass, because the world is hard and people have very strong opinions about everything these days, not just gender identity. And teach children how to deal with these fools. Block them. That's what you do. Don't block somebody if they're challenging you on a point of political discourse or anything else. But when somebody starts calling you an effing this and an effing that, just block them. You can't reason with that fool. These are bedwetting cowards. Move on. I know it's tougher on children. They're not as worldly wise. They're not as cynical as maybe we are as we get a bit older. But I wouldn't be having my child get too wound up by stuff like that. Just block the clown. Report it to Twitter if you want and move on. Be who you want to be. But the issue is not settled. That this is natural. It isn't settled. And I've made my feelings on this known before, but I'm not a doctor. I have no medical credibility or credentials. But Michelle Cretella is a woman who's interesting. She's the president of the American College of Pediatricians. And she sums up where I am on what transgender people might be really going through. Michelle Cretella, president of the American College of Pediatricians, talking about the phenomenon, and it's a growing phenomenon, issue, if you want to call it that, where young people believe that they're not in the right body, they were born in the wrong body. Have a listen to what Michelle Cretella says.
Essentially, transgender ideology holds that people can be born into the wrong body. It's simply not true. Human sexuality is binary. Okay, we know this because in nature, reproduction is the rule. And human beings, we engage in sexual reproduction. You need a man and a woman to do that. Women are XX. Those are the sex chromosomes. Women have two X's. Men have an X and a Y. Those are genetic markers. They're genetic markers for female and male, respectively. Okay, binary, that's the rule, and it's self-evident. Transgender, someone who identifies as transgender, however, that's not a problem in their body. Gender identity, all identities, they're in our thoughts. Thoughts and feelings, those are not hardwired, they develop, and they may be factually wrong or factually correct. The definition of a delusion is a fixed false belief. So if I persistently, consistently insist that I am Margaret Thatcher, or persistently, consistently insist that I am a cat, or I'm an amputee trapped in a normal body, I am delusional. And in fact, there are people who believe they are amputees trapped in a normal body. They are appropriately diagnosed as having body identity integrity disorder. If you want to cut off an arm or a leg, you're mentally ill. But if you want to cut off healthy breasts and genitals, oh, then you're transgender and you don't have a mental illness. Individuals with disorders of sex development are being used as pawns in the fight for basically a civil right to a mental illness. There's no such thing as a civil right to a mental illness, but that is in fact what we are dealing with the transgender rights movement.
And that's what I agree with, though I don't have any, as I said, any credentials. It's what I agree with. It's not because I'm some, big, ignorant white guy with a very dogmatic look on things that are different, with a very, condescending and kind of forbidding attitude towards difference and diversity. No, not at all. But it's what I believe. But I believe people should be kind to one another. Be kind. Even when activists, and I said on Sunday View yesterday, the agenda to change language and to change the laws and to inflict this on people is not coming from trans people. I don't believe it is. Be kind to people. Even when trans folks, take the hump and say stuff and use terminology and say that you're bigoted and all that, be kind, is what I would say. Because you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with your neighbours and your friends, your work colleagues who are going through something. And ultimately, it is completely harmless to you. And it's completely not a threat to you in your existence, what they might be going through, if indeed what I believe is true. And I believe what that doctor said there. Right. I'm sure this will come up again in the coming weeks and months. Going to take a very quick break. When I come back, some not so good news. I'll be talking about Gilad Atzmon, the jazz saxophonist and writer and friend of mine, and the campaign against anti-Semitism. Little bit on that when I come back. Monday's Richie Allen Show.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
And it's Monday, July 2nd. I won't give you the time because it isn't live pre-recorded shows this week, but some good content coming up this week. I can promise you that. Some not so good news. The campaign against anti-Semitism, which is a charity, laughably, which has introduced a sort of McCarthyism into the UK by accusing various people of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. It exaggerates incidents of anti-Semitism. Laughably, again laughably, as it happens, the Institute for Jewish Policy Research last year conducted the biggest and most detailed survey in the UK to date to try and ascertain what people's attitudes were towards Jews. And it found that Jew hatred is non-existent here. In fact, antipathy towards Jews, as far as it goes, the UK is the lowest in the world. There is no Jew hatred here. But these idiots, this charity makes me laugh, the campaign against anti-Semitism, had said previously that 45% of British Jews feared that they may have no future in Britain. But of course, the absent media allowed them away with that monumental bollocks of a claim, ridiculous, spurious claim that nearly half the Jews in the country feared that they may have no future in Britain because of the anti-Semitism. Bollocks, lies. Now Gideon Falter, this top man in this organisation, what a moron. I said man, he's an excuse for a man. Because rather than take people on in public, on radio or television, he slanders them, making allegations against them and providing no evidence. The Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has accused people of Holocaust denial and provided no evidence to support it, that the people they accused actually said the Jews weren't murdered in Nazi Germany. So what the CAA does is contacts venues and effectively threatens them that if they don't cancel certain speakers, they, the businesses, will suffer as a consequence because they will be known as a venue that harboured anti-Semitic speakers. What cowards these people are. What a coward the foolish puppet Gideon Falter is. Won't face people. Well, he's crowing today, delighted with himself today. He recently sued the musician and author Gilad Atzmon. He sued him for libel. He alleged, did Falter, that Gilad had accused him of fraud. So he sued him. And Gilad raised some funds via a crowdfunder. I contributed myself, not a lot, 50 quid I think. So Gilad settled, which will obviously annoy a lot of people. He settled. I don't know how I feel about it, but he settled. This from antisemitism.uk. Now this is the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism's website. This from them. Right. Where are we? Have I got it here? I have. Right, I'm going to read it. It's what they've published on their own website today. After just 2 hours of argument, High Court Justice Matthew Nicklin issued a preliminary ruling stating that Mr. Atzmon had deliberately accused Mr. Falter of dishonestly fabricating anti-Semitic incidents, deliberately exaggerating the prevalence of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic activity, including being too ready to characterise as anti-Semitism legitimate criticism of Israel. By doing these things, Mr. Falter therefore risked increasing anti-Semitism. Mr. Falter's motive was to obtain funds, including funds from the British taxpayer, to support the activities of the CAA and to provide his own income. The funds obtained by this fabrication and misrepresentation were consequently obtained by Mr. Falter's fraud, and Mr. Falter is guilty of hypocrisy. He campaigns against anti-Semitism, but he is content with its continued prevalence, even resorting to the manufacture of incidents because his income and that of the CAA depend on it. So that was the preliminary ruling by the judge. That was his ruling. So the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism wrote on its website today, faced with the impossible task of substantiating these libels, Mr. Atzmon instead capitulated and agreed to settle the case, admitting that all of the claims were false and agreeing to pay substantial damages and costs. Mr. Atzmon did not show his face in court, instead sending his solicitor to read an apology on his behalf. The defeat is a humiliation for Mr. Atzmon. How old are these fucking clowns? 12? 5? That sort of triumphalism is what you'd expect on the fucking playground. Nonsense. So what has Gilad said about it? Well, he wrote on his own website today, as you know, 3 months ago, I was sued in the High Court of England by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism's chairman Gideon Falter regarding a paper that I published on my website. I asked for your support and was thrilled to find out how vast and kind your support was. Before the trial could begin, the court held a preliminary hearing to do with the meaning of the words of my article. There was a dispute between the sides about how far my words went and what the allegations I made were. This dispute had to be resolved by the court before the actual trial took place, or could take place. The judge in the case, Justice Nicklin, applied his own meaning to my article at the preliminary hearing, which included a ruling from him that my article claimed that the funds obtained by Falter and the CAA were obtained by fraud on Mr. Falter's part. I did not and do not believe that Falter was motivated by fraud, and I do not think that there is anything I said that suggested it. However, I have to accept the ruling that the court made. Even taking the case to this point had been costly on both a financial and personal level, and after this ruling it was clear to me that I had no option but to apologise and settle the case. That's some of Gilad's statement today. Now, personally, me, Richie Allen, I don't think you can infer from Gilad's original article that he was actually accusing Falter of fraud, that Falter was financially gaining from falsely accusing others of anti-Semitism. I don't believe that Gilad inferred that in his article, and I don't believe that. Falter is a fuckwit on a grand scale, but he's not a fraud. He's not trying to con money out of people. I wouldn't have ever said that. I wouldn't believe that, and I don't believe Gilad meant it. But what are you going to do? Because the preliminary ruling, before hearing any testimony from Gilad himself, is an outrage. It's an affront to the justice system. Why make a ruling preliminarily? Why not allow Falter's barrister cross-examine Gilad in open court on the text of the article? Why not do that? I don't know, is the answer. Maybe I do know. Maybe I have opinions. I'm not scared of sharing them. I've shared them before. As to why the judicial system rules in these matters the way it does. Falter, ultimately, not a fraud, not a criminal, not at all. But he's a vile little boy. Not any sort of man. A modern-day Joseph McCarthy, who exists along with the CAA basically to shut down criticism of the Zionist, apartheid, racist and illegitimate state of Israel. Whatever he really believes. And Falter might very well believe what he says about an avalanche of Jew hatred around every corner, but it ain't true. I would say to Giddy Falter and his band of merry fuckwits, how do you like 100 people or more being murdered by Israeli fucking snipers? How do you like that? Women coming to aid the injured being shot in the head, in the chest by Israeli snipers. How do you like that? Are you that fucking sick that you stand over a regime that does that to people? Have a look at yourself in the mirror. If he had a bollock or a testicle to his name, he'd have come on this show where he would have been treated with the utmost respect to debate these issues. Indeed, I have an email exchange between me and him, inviting him on, promising him that he would be treated with the utmost courtesy, or that I would be forever condemned as a fucking liar. Stand up to people. You want to call people names and try and destroy their livelihoods, have the fucking balls to come and speak to them like a man. No chance with the likes of Giddy Falter. Enough on that. I'm sure Gilad Atzmon will be posting about it liberally on his own website, gilad.co.uk. Now, the Syrian government and its president, Bashar al-Assad, is on the verge of winning the war against the jihadi factions and the Wahhabists that were unleashed on his country by the agents of the United States, the UK, France and Israel. He's on the verge of winning there. It's incredible, really, after years of it. They've launched an assault on rebel-held areas in Daraa and Quneitra. I think I pronounced that right, Quneitra. And they really are on the verge of winning. It's remarkable, really. And the BBC are reporting on that today. But the United Nations and the so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is a fucking t-shirt seller in Coventry, amazingly, are saying that, you know, people are fleeing. But what else can they do? What can the government do, the Syrian government? And they're still calling these people rebels. Rebel-held areas, says the BBC. They're not rebels. They are Wahhabist, jihadi nutjobs sent in there by Saudi Arabia, USA, UK, France and Israel to destabilise that country, but it hasn't worked because Russian airstrikes have helped the advancement of government troops into these areas, and Assad is going to win. What's going to happen after that? I don't know. The legendary journalist Seymour Hersh, who likes to be called Cy Hersh, was on Going Underground on RT this weekend, and he had some very interesting things to say on the white helmet first responders. Now, we've talked a lot about them on this show in the last few years. And also, he talks about evidence that he saw that proves that the US government under President Barack Obama knew that Assad's army had not deployed sarin gas in East Ghouta in 2013. This is very good, Cy Hersh. Ah, Jesus, Richie. Let me try that again. Be helpful if I had the fader up. Seymour Hersh on the white helmets and the knowledge that the US had that Assad was not behind sarin gas attacks in Syria. Seymour Hersh.
I'm sure there's some people in the white helmets that were very actually doing what, trying to save lives, but it's pretty clear now that they're basically the major funding. Also, I think America was indirectly supplying some money. Certainly the Brits were. And so certainly it was a propaganda organization too, along with possibly doing some real good relief work. But too many times we've seen the same child in photographs, year after year, always covered in dust. I mean, there's been a lot of actually good reporting on it, that they do engage in anti-Assad. But it's very easy here. Assad is hated. And I get a lot of criticism for having a different story, for example, about the use of sarin. And I couldn't publish what I wanted about him in America. I had to publish it here in the London Review. Now, all that happens is, in June of 2013, there was a very important all-source intelligence report put out by the American Defense Intelligence Agency. It included what made it complicated for me. I got a copy. Leaked, I guess you call it.
Good stuff. He's spot on about the white helmets, of course. We talked a lot about the white helmets over the years. So a leaked report in 2013, sarin gas. Do tell Seymour Hersh.
I had a report that said there was tremendous concern in the community because both Turkey, through their gendarmerie, their para-police units, were driving truckfuls of the chemicals that, when mixed together, make a nerve agent. It's called kitchen sarin. It's very crude. The Syrian army has a very sophisticated sarin that has additives that make it more lethal, more toxicity, more penetration, much better weapon. And we also knew from this intelligence report that Saudi Arabia and Turkey were supplying the basic chemicals to al-Nusra, which ISIS wasn't there then. Al-Nusra was the cutting edge. And so there was
linked to Al-Qaeda.
Tremendous, yes, well, absolutely linked to Al-Qaeda. We always link everything to Al-Qaeda because there was a law passed in 2002 after the invasion that said anytime Al-Qaeda is involved, the president can do what he wants without Congress. So we always call everything Al-Qaeda. I mean, everything around in Libya was Al-Qaeda. Throughout Africa, we use Al-Qaeda because that gives you the cover of the law. Congress passed that stupid act, giving Bush the right to intervene anywhere without going in congressional authorization. It's an amazing piece of legislation.
Yes.
Talk about dumb.
Talk about dumb. That law was a disgrace. Basically, the US administration at any time can say, well, Al-Qaeda did it. And by saying that, you can circumnavigate Congress and the Senate and you can act unilaterally. Those neocon Zionist madmen, eh? Fuckery, yes. Back to the raw materials, the ingredients, the Saudis, the Turks, who made the gas, who used it. This ain't brand new, folks, but he's a well-known, respected journalist, and you can take this to the unbelievers. Seymour Hersh.
Anyway, the point is, this report troubled everybody. There was a study done about what can we do about it, how many people, American soldiers, we didn't want al-Nusra to have nerve agents. Suddenly comes this attack, and we get a sample from the Russians, and it's taken to Sir Peter Wall, who was the director general, the head of the British military. The sample is taken to his people.
Porton Down, yeah.
They go take it to Porton Down, where they conclude, we know what Syria has. Syria's been a signatory to the Geneva Convention on chemical weapons. We know what Syria has. We know what it looks like. And what was used in that place was not the same as in the Syrian military. This is told to Obama 2 times by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs before the reason he didn't bomb. Remember the red line when the attack took place. So when the attack took place at allegedly 1,400, was 1/10 as many, it doesn't matter. When the attack took place and people were killed and the world said, Bashar Assad did it. My government said that. The government knew. They knew from this very important intelligence report that caused a huge study to be done inside about what to do about it. It would take 60,000 troops to get into the war. We were thinking of maybe sending troops on the side of Bashar, really, to get rid of this stuff. We didn't want these guys to have it.
Now that is horse manure. Come on, Si, pull the other one there. The US government was thinking of sending troops in to fight al-Nusra at Assad's side because they didn't want al-Nusra to have the second-grade sarin. Please. Come on, Seymour Hersh. As if the Americans didn't know. As if they didn't know that this stuff was given to al-Nusra to be used and blamed on Assad, eh? Who do you think was behind these materials coming in through Turkey and Saudi Arabia? Anyway, maybe he believes it. One other thing he said which was good, when Assad is called a monster and brutal and the Syrian army is called terrible, this is what he said.
People who fight wars all fight the same way. He doesn't do anything differently than we do. We bomb the hell out of people. How can the United States use the nuclear bomb in Hiroshima and did daylight bombing of major cities in Germany, 1944 cities? You know, the famous bombings that Dresden, just firestorms. Who are we to say somebody else is a war criminal for fighting the war? He was in a war, a guerrilla war, and by all accounts, the casualties were almost the same on both sides. If this is an apology, that's just people not wanting to believe their dislike, letting their personal dislike overcome reality.
Very good. He also said one thing. I'm out of time. He also said one thing. I'm actually over time. He said one thing that was very interesting too. He said when he was submitting articles about corruption and about malfeasance and wrongdoing during the Bush-Cheney administration, those articles always made it into print. But when the same corruption carried on during the Obama administration, which it always does, he said he couldn't get those articles published. The progressive press didn't want to hear a bad word said about Obama. Again, that's no surprise. That's it for Monday's program. Thank you for listening to it. Thank you for sharing it on social media. I'll be back with you again tomorrow, Tuesday. The program will continue to air this week at 7 p.m. It's brand new every evening at 7, but it will be pre-recorded while the weather is as extremely warm as it is right now. Enjoyed that today. Thanks a lot. Back tomorrow, Tuesday, July 3rd at the usual time, he says, of 7 p.m, leaving you with some Billy Ocean. See you tomorrow.